Good morning, this is Michelle Thompson, your academic and legal coach, and today I'm presenting you the third part of a five-part series on planning. So today I'm going to focus on how you can break down your tasks. Before I jump into that, are you a woman who's in academia or law? And this doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter if you're a graduate student, a postdoc, an adjunct, or full-time professor. Actually, this kind of thing is good for anybody. So, stay here. This is for you. Anyone will benefit. Here's the thing. Do you have something personal or professional that you really want to accomplish that you can't seem to really make progress on, or you haven't been able to get it, you haven't been able to reach that goal? Do you start making your way to something and then flounder somewhere along the way? Do you want to move things into the right direction? The solution is that you need a plan. That's why I'm doing this particular series. You need a plan. And, I've talked to a lot of lawyers, I've talked to lots of academics, and so many of the challenges that we face in those professions have everything to do with having a plan, right? That if we actually figured out how to set up our days so that we have more contact with students, or get towards the end of that book or whatever, we could do this if we actually planned out how to get there, plan out what our larger objectives are, and make our way out there. So I know what you're thinking. I really hate planning. It's like boring and whatever. It never works. But then let me ask you this question. How are things going for you without that plan? Are you making the progress you want to make? And if you're not, then you need to stay put and you need to consider what you're doing. I mean, think about it. When you decide to drive from New York to Washington, D.C., do you just take a road and go? Because if you take 87, you're going to head somewhere in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and not DC. No, you set your GPS and you have your GPS tell you precisely what roads to take and how to get there. And your GPS tells you how many miles and how much time you can expect given the traffic. That's all I'm asking you to do. You need a direction. You need your own GPS. You need to be able to decide what roads you're going on down to the traffic. And that's what this series is designed to help you do. Thursdays, 10 a.m., this particular page, this is for you. No matter your industry or field, many problems could be solved in your personal and professional life if you had a plan. So here, let's go ahead and get one. Today, on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, I'm going to focus on what are the tasks that are part of your plan. Next week, May 12th, I'm going to focus on accountability and execution. And May 19th, yes, what if things go wrong, how to get back on your plan, or how to tweak your plan so that it works for you. So today, what are the steps towards accomplishing your goal? None of these parts are actually easy to do, but they make your life easier, if that makes sense. So that's why I go through this. So based on what we did last week, you have a big goal, then you have sub goals under those goals. Sometimes those sub goals are called objectives. Objectives that you want to meet so you can move forward towards your goal. Now you need to figure out the tasks that you need to do to actually accomplish your goal, to get there. And so I'm actually today not going to focus on the professional kinds of tasks. I'm going to focus on the non-professional tasks, because you know what? We need to set up these goals and have our objectives no matter what we're doing. It doesn't matter if we're trying to plan a wedding or write a book. It doesn't matter if we're trying to make partner or learn how to play golf. We actually need to have a game plan to accomplish any of these particular goals. So my examples today will be based on non-professional goals. So you want to figure out what the particular tasks are for everything. It doesn't matter if you're preparing songs for a concert, if you're knitting or crocheting, my personal favorite, if you're growing a vegetable garden, right? You need to have particular tasks. So here's the thing. Let's take one of those examples, right? I personally love to knit and crochet. It's like I spend lots of time playing with yarn. And so I'm going to take that particular goal of knitting a sweater and break down the kinds of objectives you may need to meet to accomplish the goal. So the objectives to make some kind of garment, you have to figure out is what kind of garment you're going to make, and therefore what kind of garment are you going to make? What kind of yarn are you going to use? What color is it going to be? What kind of stitch pattern are you going to use given the yarn and the color? You get the point, right? So we're going to use SMART. We're going to use the criteria of SMART to figure out how to get there, right? So SMART is an acronym that it means smart, but it also is an acronym. It means specific, measurable, accountable, specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time-bound. Let me repeat that because I screwed that up before. It's specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time-bound. So we're going to set up SMART goals for knitting a garment, a SMART task for knitting a garment, right? So to figure out what kind of garment you're going to make, you probably need to have a sense. Let's turn out the task for this. I bet you didn't know it was so complicated to actually sit down and make something with yarn, but it's true. You actually have to have a sense of these things, right? So, for example, what the tasks for knitting a sweater under figuring out what kind of garment to make would be: look at a pattern. Assess the difficulty level of each pattern. To figure out what kind of yarn does each pattern use. Can you substitute a different yarn? Yeah, lots of steps. So let's look at the first part of this. And let's make it a smart objective, right? We're going to look at patterns, right? Because that's one of the tasks that we broke down. Looking at patterns is not a bad task. It isn't, but it could be improved. And let's improve upon it using the criteria of SMART. So, could it be more specific? Look at patterns. Yeah, it really could be a lot more specific. The question becomes, what am I knitting? Garment doesn't say enough, right? What am I knitting? Maybe it's a sweater. Yeah, let's go with the sweater. Maybe it's spring, right? And we need something lighter for spring. You wouldn't know that here in New York, but that's a different issue. Okay, so you might want a lighter sweater for spring, right? So now we're more specific about what kind of garment we're going to make. We're not going to make some heavy wool winter sweater, okay? So now that we know the specificity of what kind of pattern we're looking at, then we have to look at and make it measurable, right? There are endless spring sweater patterns, and there are endless winter sweater patterns that you can convert to a spring sweater pattern. We don't want to be looking at patterns forever and ever. Amen. We want to knit our sweater at some point, right? So then what do you have to do? You have to make it measurable. So my cutoff point is I'm done after 5. I'm going to really assess 5 patterns and choose from that. So 5 patterns is my goal. I'm going to look at 5 patterns and then pick one. So that's the measurable part. The accountable part is, have I set this up as something that I could tell, or someone else could hold me accountable to? Can I use it as a metric towards achieving my goal? Can they ask me particularly, have you done X by Y, right? And choosing a pattern fits by that. We can set it up so that I can tell you, someone could ask me, Michelle, did you choose that pattern by the end of this weekend? We'll get to the rest of that shortly. So it's an accountable kind of task. Is it a realistic task? Well, we narrowed this down to what I'm knitting and how many patterns, right? It's now realistic. I am not going to look at the whole universe of patterns for spring sweaters. I'm going to look at 5 and then cut it down to 1. This is now a realistic type of task. If I didn't narrow it down, it'd be very different. It would be a far less achievable goal. And finally, is it time-bound? Well, we're going to make this time-bound, right? So let's say I'm going to look for this pattern and narrow it down over 3 days. Maybe over the weekend. I'll have Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday, right? So this time standard is one that allows me to be able to tell that I'm moving towards my goal, that you're moving towards your goal. Because if you can't tell, you're not going to do it and you're going to give up. Or before you decide to give up, if you can't tell, maybe it's an objective that you need to break down into smaller parts. So if you break it down into smaller parts, then you'll get the task that is a movable goal, something where you can tell, oh yes, I'm making progress. I'm achieving knitting that sweater. Then after you have your nice, cute, time measurable task, put it in your calendar. I say this every week, but it is so important because if you have it in your calendar, you have a way of seeing if you're moving towards your goal, if you're a little behind, if you're a little ahead, you can assess that and you can be very real with that, right? So you want to put it in your calendar. You won't be accountable to yourself or others until you have that particular time measurable dates. And I would actually encourage you to tell others so that you actually have some other level of accountability outside of yourself going, I didn't do it. So let's look at my revamped SMART task, the task that really meets that criteria, right? Remember, we started this with pick a pattern. My first task for knitting a sweater now is looking at 5 patterns for light spring sweaters over the weekend. That is SMART. That is something I can really work with. It's specific, it's measurable, it's accountable, it's realistic, and it's time bound. You can use that particular set of criteria to assess tasks for your personal or professional goals. That's what's great about it, right? And every time you set these kinds of tasks, they should have all of these attributes. Actually, you can use SMART criteria to set up objectives. You can use them to set up goals, overall goals as well. You have to make them a little larger if you're going for that, but for the purpose of setting up tasks, this is actually perfect. You should make sure it hits all of these attributes. You don't have to do it in that order. Like, you may not be able to assess if it's realistic until you figure it out what the time deadline is on it. And that makes total sense. It doesn't have to be in this particular order. Just make sure it has all of these elements, that it's specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time bound. With that said, I just want to ask a couple questions after you actually come up with your plan. Is your plan real and now that your plan is real and concrete, right? You have these tasks and you know how you're going to go ahead and achieve your goal. How does it feel to you? Because if it doesn't feel good, it probably isn't going to work for you, right? It should feel doable. And if it's not doable, you want to tweak it. You want to go back to each of these steps of figuring out the larger goal, figuring out the objectives towards obtaining your goal, and setting out the task to make it something that's very, very doable. So you don't sit there and go, right? You want it to work. Does it help you take the worry and stress off of the table? You shouldn't have a plan that just like makes you lose your breath at every step, right? It should be something that you can tell will actually work for you. If you still feel anxious after you've gone back and retooled, ask yourself these questions and kind of sit with them quietly. And maybe you want to journal about them. Like the questions about, does it seem doable? Does it take worry and stress off of the table? And if it, what is the consequence for not achieving them? What is actually real here, right? If it's real that you can do it, then maybe your worry and stress is about something else. And if you can't really find anything wrong with the plan, then here's the thing. You're just going to have to try to do it. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing something in spite of the fear you feel. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving ahead and doing something regardless of how you feel. So, you actually just need to dive on in and try your plan. Try implementing it. Try implementing it for at least one good month. Because if you're making progress to your goal at the end of that month, your plan is perfect. Maybe not perfect, but you get the point. It's good, and that's where you need to head. Honestly, at the beginning of each week, every Sunday evening after the sun goes down, because I like to have my full Sunday, what I do is I set my goals for the week based on my work plan. It's true. I sit down and I have my larger goals that I'm trying to accomplish, and I put in my calendar what the steps are to accomplishing those, and I set them down for the week. And I feel anxious when I start that process. I'm going to be honest with you. Totally anxious. But by the time I finish, I'm like, oh, okay. And I can just look at my calendar and go, okay, today on Monday, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And it takes all of that stress out of the beginning of the week. There's no need for it, right? Especially if we have a plan. So I really encourage you to try planning. It really goes a long way. And it really cuts so many problems that people don't have. So with that said, thank you for listening. Remember, I'm going to be here next Thursday doing the next part of planning at 10 a.m. And I'm going to talk about accountability and bringing in a crew with you to go ahead and achieve your plan. Before you leave, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. Number one, like my page. It's very simple. You're here on Facebook Live with Michelle Dion Thompson, Life Coach. Please go ahead and like the page. And if you scroll down on the left side of the page, you will see a MailChimp link. If you're interested in being if you're an academic who's interested in being on my mailing list and receiving my newsletter so you know what I'm thinking, getting tips, and what I'm going to be offering, please go ahead and click on that link and sign up for my newsletter. If you are a lawyer, go in the comment section after I post this video and click on that on one of the comments where it'll have a link for you to go ahead and sign up for my newsletter as a lawyer. So yes, like the page, sign up for my newsletter. In the comments, if you have any reactions or questions or concerns, I'm happy to address them in the comment section. I will read your comments and I will get back to you. And who knows, maybe your comment will actually become a video that I do as well. If you want one-on-one help with planning and achieving your goals, send me a note here on my Facebook page for a free consultation. I would be more than happy to sit down with you and figure out what you're trying to achieve and help you get there. If you're a lawyer, you should know that I have a new program starting on June 1st. I'm really excited about it. It's called Tribe of Legal Warriors. If you are a woman who is practicing law in any way, shape, or form, and you want to figure out how to get rid of the administrative BS in your life, or maybe you want to figure out how to become a partner, or you want to earn more, whatever it is, join the Tribe of Legal Warriors. If you click sign up, it'll bring you to the page where you can go ahead and register for that. I wouldn't want you to miss that. You're going to have a great group of women, your tribe, who are going to help you achieve your legal goals. And finally, on Wednesdays, there is one academic thing and one legal thing. One academic thing is a Twitter chat, and where you tell me one thing that you would like to change about your daily academic life to make your job go better. Every Wednesday, 11 to 11:30 a.m. I'd love to see you there. If you're a lawyer, I hold that Twitter chat every Wednesday at 8 p.m., 8 till 8:30 p.m., and you can weigh in on one thing that you'd like to change about your job. If you don't put in hashtag one academic thing, hashtag one legal thing, I won't necessarily see your comment, and I would hate for that to disappear into the ether. That's it. Have a great Thursday, and I will see you right here next week. Bye-bye.